we're still looking at Searle on proper names, and today I want to begin by going over the points about informative identities and the cluster theory that we were looking at last time. On Searle's kind of picture, and this is quite plausible, you see why he says this, that if you've got a name in your vocabulary, you understand this name, then what's fixing the reference to the name is typically not what you think, but a cluster of descriptions associated with that name by the community. So you're not quite in charge of the word, you're using the name the same way everyone else uses it. And that's obviously so for names of people in public life, for people you talk about from the news. Oh my God. Maybe I shouldn't. Good news, I think. Oh. Okay. Of course it does. These things don't just happen. Let's take it from the top. So this is theory of meaning. We're going to do the Searle thing, and we're talking about how informative identities have to do with what the individual's take on the objects is, and on the other hand, the reference of a name on Searle's picture is getting fixed by the community. And it's certainly possible that you could associate the same descriptions with two names, but wonder whether the community does. That's to say, if you take a remark like Tully is Cicero, actually I never heard of Tully and Cicero outside the context of philosophy examples. I don't wish to seem like some barbarian, but there you go, that's the truth. And if you ask me what I associate with the name Tully, it's some Greek, and if you ask me what I associate with the name Cicero, it's some Greek. So I associate, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, I associate the same descriptions with both of them. Yeah, but still in all, I can wonder, well, maybe the people who know about these things don't associate the same descriptions with both of them. So it's certainly not true that I'd say that's an uninformative identity, that Tully is Cicero. Really, what you want to say is I know too little about it for that to be either informative or uninformative. There's another kind of example that Kripke introduced, where you could have just one name. There's really only just one name here being used by the community, and there's a single collection of descriptions associated with that name by the community. But you might wonder, is that really the same person? Is there just one person here? So just think for a moment how that might be possible. You got a single name, like Bill Clinton or something like that. You got a single cluster of descriptions associated with it in the community. It's the same kind of storm of gossip and news that follows Bill wherever he goes. But you might wonder, is it really one person? You might think it's not true that it's just one person here. I mean, for example, if you were doing some political history, you might say, I know about the movie star Ronald Reagan, and I know about the president Ronald Reagan, but it can't be one and the same person. I mean, this isn't Renaissance Italy. How could there be two people who combined these movie acting abilities and these presidential capacities in the one frame? I mean, in the community is common knowledge that it's one and the same person. But you might say, how could that be? The great movie star can't be the same person as the person who defeated the evil empire. So when you say Reagan starred in that Western, and when you say Reagan was president in 1981, you just must be talking about two different people. That's not altogether irrational. That's a question that occurs to many people across the world. How could that have happened? Right? So when you say, here's the movie actor, and here's the decisive president, how could it be one and the same person? It could be not just informative, it could be a bombshell to be told that really is one and the same person. Right? So even although it's a single name with a single cluster of descriptions associated with it circulating in the community, when you're using that name, it could be informative to you to be told that Reagan, the movie actor, is Reagan, the politician. It could be informative to you to be told is one and the same person. So you can't just read off informativeness or uninformativeness from whether it's a single cluster of descriptions circulating in the community. Yep. I mean, once you see how this kind of example works, is it plain how this kind of example works? You can start generating more. I suppose you think further about the history of California. You're thinking about Reagan and you think, well, what fixes reference? What fixes reference for these two sides is the same for both. But a single thoughtful individual might find the identity informative. And then you think, well, what about Schwarzenegger? How could that have happened? It can't be the same person. That couldn't really happen. But so it's going to be informative for you. But I don't know, maybe this is going too far into political theory, or Californian political theory. Okay? So there's a kind of disconnect between the way the reference to the name is being fixed and what's informative or uninformative for you. So I think when you bear this kind of point in mind, if you look carefully at what Searle is saying in that article about informativeness and uninformativeness, really none of it actually seems to work. And here is Searle on informativeness. He says, consider your original identity. Tully is Cicero. A statement made using this sentence would, I suggest, be analytic for most people. The same descriptive presuppositions are associated with the name. But it's right to say that for most people, if assuming I'm typical, the same descriptive presuppositions are associated with the name, because we all associate something very minimal with it, like some Greek. But that doesn't mean we regard this as trivial or analytic or a priori. Well, that must definitely be true. I mean, otherwise, all the names of Greek figures that you've dimly heard, you regard all those identities as analytic. That can't be right. Yeah. So Searle is assuming that the identity is uninformative when the speaker associates the same descriptions with the two uses of the name. That would only work. You can see why he says that, but that would only work if it was which descriptions you associate with the name that's fixing reference. But the whole point of a social theory is that it's not what you think about the reference of the name that matters, it's what's going on in the community from which a language comes. It's a socially determined cluster of descriptions that is fixing the reference. So two terms could have two socially determined clusters associated with them, like Tully and Cicero. Maybe the Greek scholars all think they're very different, and maybe nowadays it's thought actually they were different people. But I, as an individual, might be associating the same descriptions with the two names. Okay, so that's just to walk through some of the points that we were talking about last time about how difficult it is to have both the socially determined character of reference fixing and an account of meaning that's going to explain informativeness versus uninformativeness, informativeness versus uninformativeness of identity. Is that plain to say? There's seats right over. Yeah. Yep.
So just to clarify, so
Sure.
give examples of how something with the same name, like Renius is Renius, can be appointed to something completely different, like Cicero.
Uh,
So you can turn down the research.
No, well, yeah, the Reagan is Reagan kind of thing is not Searle, right?
In that example.
Right. I'm putting that forward as a point about how difficult life is for Searle. So I'm putting this forward as a criticism of Searle, really, because how should I put this? Okay, so you've got the individual here. This is how I think of it. So I may as well draw. Here is the individual. Here is the cluster of descriptions associated with the name in the community. Yeah. So that's like the cluster associated with the name in the community. The individual tries to tap into that cluster of descriptions, tries to take on board as much as they can. So what do you say about when an identity is uninformative? Well, there are two things you could say. One is uninformative that A is B if I associate the same descriptions with A as with B. Well, that's one possibility. That would be the wrong answer. What about that? You see that's first of all, that's one possible answer. If you've got this Frege puzzle, when is an identity uninformative? Let me take this slowly. When is an identity informative or uninformative? Right? So I raised that question about this A is B. That's okay. Yep, happy with that. Here is one answer. It's uninformative for me if I associate the same descriptions with A as I do with B. Right? That must be the wrong answer because of what I was saying about Tully and Cicero. I associate the same descriptions with Tully as I do with Cicero, some Greek. But I don't regard that at all as meaning that the identity is uninformative. Yeah, I have no idea whether it's true or not that Tully and Cicero. I read it in the books, but that's informative. Yeah, that's okay. So what are you going to do? Well, you could say the identity is uninformative if it's the same cluster of descriptions fixing the reference of A as fixes the reference of B. But that's the Reagan is Reagan example. Those two uses of the name Reagan are both associated with the same cluster of descriptions in the community. Out there in the real world, political commentators and journalists and so on don't make a distinction. They just use the name Reagan indifferently for the movie actor or the politician. Yeah? I mean, for any of us with rich or complex lives, our names have got this rich collection of descriptions associated with them. But that identity, Reagan is Reagan, can be informative for an individual, even though it's the same cluster of descriptions fixing reference in the community. So how are you going to explain when an identity is uninformative? You can't do it. There aren't any pieces here that would let you explain that. It's a really hard question. Yeah? Yeah, you could say the Greek call. Well, in that case, if you make it like that, then there probably aren't any definite descriptions I associate with Tully and with Cicero. I mean, I don't then suggest uniqueness, right? And I don't think I know anything that would be unique about them. Maybe they weren't even called Tully or Cicero. Maybe the Greeks called them something quite different. I know we should completely destroy my credibility here, but I have no idea, frankly, what the Greeks called them, or if those names were invented in the 19th century or something. Yeah. So in that case, I'd have to say, well, I associate with Tully 0 definite descriptions, and with Cicero 0 definite descriptions. So that's the same. Doesn't make it uninformative that Tully is Cicero. Yeah. Or even if there is something, won the Battle of Xerxes or something like that, then that's, even if I got one definite description I associate with each, that's not going to mean I regard the identity as informative if it's different definite descriptions. Because these might be just two stray things that everybody who knows anything about ancient Greece knows that it's actually one and the same person. These are just notational variants, these two names. There doesn't really, when you trace it back, there's different ways of spelling the same thing. That could really be a trivial thing that Tully is Cicero. Yeah, for all you can tell looking at what descriptions I associate with the names. Yeah, one thing. If it's an a priori truth, it's that's right. If it's an a priori truth, it doesn't really depend which individual it is. Yeah. But my point is, informativeness seems to, is known. If it's knowable a priori, knowledge is a characteristic of an individual. It's the individual that knows or not. So in that sense, it's a property of individuals. Because you're talking about whether an individual can know this a priori. Yeah. And my point here is that whether an individual can know this a priori is not determined by what's going on in the society at large. Because what's going on in society at large is one thing, and what's going on in my head is another. Yeah. But for knowledge, what's going on in my head, it seems to be very important. Yep. Well, I'm sure Searle would say it doesn't make it like difficult. The trouble is, Searle is trying to explain Frege's puzzle about informative versus uninformative identities. And when you look at as you go through the article, you have to look quite carefully, but you will find various remarks there about how this approach in terms of socially determined clusters of descriptions fixing reference allows you to explain which identities are informative, which identities are uninformative. And my point is it doesn't, because looking at the level of the whole socially determined cluster means that, well, in the case of Reagan or Schwarzenegger, you've got one socially determined cluster fixing reference, but the identity could be informative. Yeah. And if you look at the level of the individual, what's going on with things like Tully or Cicero, then the person associating the same descriptions with the two names doesn't make the identity uninformative. Yeah. So he doesn't have enough pieces there to explain the distinction between uninformative and uninformative identities. It was all right, so long as you thought that we're just thinking in terms of the language of a single individual and the descriptions associated with a name by that individual as fixing reference. Then you could say, if I associate the same descriptions with two uses of a name, then it must be the same thing, and otherwise the identity is uninformative. Yeah. At one level that works just fine, that picture. But once you go social, you really are caught. Yeah. Yeah. Informative versus community. Yeah, I wouldn't want to deny, it does go back to the question, because I was saying, well, knowledge is something the individual has. Yeah? But when people are talking about scientific developments, well, we now know that the Higgs boson exists, and you're not talking about the knowledge any one individual has, you're talking about the knowledge that the community as a whole has. Yeah, so something like that. Then you might indeed be able to say, well, we know this or we know that, and talk about knowledge as something that the collective has. We now know that Tully is Cicero, or that Tully was not Cicero. Yeah. The thing is, that was not how Frege stated it. Yeah. Frege's problem was about the knowledge an individual has. Yeah. It hasn't occurred to me actually to think of working through these puzzles about informativeness and non-informativeness at the level of the community. It's a little bit difficult to say what would be a priori at the level of the community. I mean, for most people, was it a hard-won discovery that this successful politician was indeed the movie actor? You know, were most people aghast when that was pointed out? Or was it pretty generally known the whole time? There are going to be difficult questions there. With Tullius Cicero, was the community of ancient historians enthralled by the discovery of Tullius Cicero? Or was it something that everybody has known since work in ancient Greece began? Yeah. It's going to be a little bit difficult to know how these distinctions work out at the level of a community. But anyway, Frege's puzzle was not pitched at the level of community knowledge. Frege's puzzle was pitched at the level of the knowledge an individual has. Is this a priori or not? But it's worth thinking through that. Did you? Okay. Okay, you see it? Yeah. That's right. That's right. I mean, if I'm going to use a name like Bill Clinton and tell you all kinds of scandalous stories about Bill Clinton, if at the end of the day it suddenly turned out I was using Bill Clinton as a name for my next door neighbour, I could still be sued. It really wouldn't help. I don't have that right to just associate any description I like with the name. That's right. You do your best. That's right. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to take on board as much of this as you reasonably can. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, if you're going to be responsible in your use of language, that's what I mean about that Bill Clinton example I just gave. You've got to be responsible in your use of language. And that is a matter of trying to tap into what's going on socially. Yeah. But in a way, the question about informativeness or uninformativeness comes up after you've done that, after you've acquired a mastery of the name. Which identities are going to be informative and which are going to be uninformative? Yeah. But it's important to think about the mechanics of the process you're describing. Okay. Okay, well, for just a minute now, I want to kind of pan back and look at the kind of framework in which we're thinking about language here. So this is a really important idea that for the moment is guiding everything we do. That knowing the meaning of a statement is knowing what has to be the case for it to be true. I'm genuinely puzzled as to how much plainer I can make that, and I really don't know if that seems immediately plausible as it stands, or if it seems kind of like a baffling remark and you think, why did he say that? Can you put your hand up if that seems reasonable enough? Put your hand up if that seems kind of baffling. Yeah, I mean, so can you put your hand up if that seems kind of baffling? Knowing the meaning of a statement is knowing what has to be the case for it to be true. It may be a mark of great intelligence to find it baffling or not. It's that you're not getting something. Yeah. Okay, I'm very glad that many of you find this intuitive enough. Well, I gave this example. You take some statement you don't know the meaning of at all, well, let's suppose La Neige est blanche. And then I tell you what it takes for that to be true. That would be true just in case snow is white. Now do you understand the remark?
Yeah, but I mean, does that mean that words don't have, a single word can have meaning?
That's right. I'm just talking about the meaning of a statement. I'm not talking about the meaning of an individual word.
I mean, intuitively, I think that the meaning of statement and the meaning of word have to be word loop.
That's right. The meaning of a statement and the meaning of a word must be connected. That's the second sentence I'm going to come on to. But right now I'm only talking about the meaning of a whole statement. Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Okay. Well, we will come back to this. I just want to touch base on how intuitive that is. But if knowing the meaning of a statement is a matter of knowing what has to be the case for it to be true, well, words have their meanings by contributing to the truth values of statements, right? I mean, a statement has got lots of individual words in it, and you understand what the meaning is of an individual word when you know what difference it's making to the truth or falsity of the whole statement. Yep. I mean, that's really just what the last comments have said, that there's got to be a connection between the meaning of a word and the meaning of a statement. And this second sentence here is just saying the meaning of a term is what contribution it makes to determining the truth or falsity of a sentence containing it. There's no more to, I'm using semantic value there. That's not a term that's used in the literature that we're looking at, but this is just a definition of semantic value. Semantic value of a term is the contribution it makes to determining the truth or falsity of a statement containing it. So take, for example, suppose you take Sally. Is that a single term or a general term? Singular. Is tall. General, very good. So what difference does Sally make to the truth or falsity of a statement containing it? How does Sally have a semantic value? The answers here are very, very simple. And what is the semantic value going to be of is tall? How does is tall make a difference to the truth or falsity of a statement containing it? You have a shot? No one has a shot? Okay, you're probably thinking the answer. I would like you to think about this for just a second. What is the semantic value of Sally? What is the semantic value of is tall? How do these terms make a difference to the truth or falsity of statements containing them? Okay, in the case of Sally,